This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. Demanding change, hundreds of thousands of people are gathering in Khartoum in the biggest push yet for a civilian-run government. 5 times president, now Uganda's Supreme Court clears the way for Yoweri Museveni to run again as it scraps presidential age limits. Also in the program, following in the footsteps of a golden generation, we visit the Ivory Coast Football Academy, which has produced some of the game's best-known stars, but has it lost its form? And South Africa's coastal city, Durban, steps in to rescue the COSAFA Cup. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Hundreds of thousands of people have gathered in Khartoum in one of the biggest protests so far to push Sudan's ruling military council into accepting demands for a civilian-run government. As we speak, the streets around the military headquarters are packed with demonstrators. Alicia Lithed has more.
Marching for more on the streets of Khartoum. It's been a week since President Omar al-Bashir was removed from power, but the protests go on. The louder the voices, the more chance they believe they have of achieving lasting change. This is the obvious face of a protest that's already achieved so much, but the real hope for Sudan lies with the negotiations going on behind the scenes.
Well, the protest organisers called on 1 million people to come on the streets of the capital. And there are groups like these are the lawyers, coming from every street, gathering in this central area. And it's really important for the opposition figures who are trying to negotiate with the military over the future path for Sudan, that the people stay on the streets, that this pressure is maintained.
The military council has been meeting opposition politicians and groups that make up a movement known as the Forces for Freedom and Change. There is disagreement within the opposition as to who should be involved in this process. Professors at the historically independent University of Khartoum have an initiative to guide the process and secretly began preparing plans for a switch to civilian rule months ago.
All the groups who are under the Change and Freedom, if they can come together in 1 or 2 days, they can decide who is going to be the prime minister, how many ministers that we want. They can do it together, we are sure. But what we want is that, of course, all the other parties that ruled or being part of the ruling government before, or even all other parties, we know that we don't want them during the transition period.
This is a process that's being driven by young people. They want civilians running this country. But international opinion is split between those backing the stability of military rule and those encouraging democracy.
Sudan is in a moment of potentially huge historic change, and what we're looking for is for this change to be positive, and that means rule in Sudan returning back to civilians. The military is currently in control, and we're really keen to see civilians take over this transition.
The call for people to come here today in huge numbers appears to have been heeded. One of the largest protests so far is a symbol of a determination for real change. Alicia Lithed, BBC News, Khartoum.
Let's now take a quick look at other stories making headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. Nigeria's suspended Chief Justice Walter Onnoghen has been found guilty of false asset declaration by a Code of Conduct tribunal. Mr. Onnoghen failed to divulge cash in 5 foreign bank accounts. The tribunal ordered he be removed from his post and banned from holding public office for a decade. He must also forfeit all money that he failed to declare. Now, 114 people are still missing in the Democratic Republic of Congo days after a boat capsized on Lake Kivu. President Felix Tshisekedi has declared Friday a day of mourning. 13 people were killed in the accident. Now, the president also announced new safety measures, making it obligatory for passengers on the lake to wear life jackets. Now, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has replaced the country's first female defense minister, Aisha Mohammed, giving the post to the influential Oromia regional president, Lema Megersa. Mr. Abiy did not give reasons for the decision, but it comes amid growing concern about ethnic conflict in the country. Now, Zimbabwe has been marking 39 years of independence, with tens of thousands turning out for celebrations across the country. Now, one notable absence was the former leader, Robert Mugabe, who's receiving medical treatment in Singapore. In a speech to the nation, President Emmerson Mnangagwa said it is up to Zimbabweans to rebuild their own nation. BBC's Shinga Inyoka reports from Harare.
It's a damp anniversary this year, but one that hasn't diminished the significance of this occasion. Tens of thousands of Zimbabweans have turned out to commemorate 39 years of self-rule. Now, this event has been marked by military displays and parades, but at the back of everybody's mind is the question, what has changed? Now, Emmerson Mnangagwa has been in power for the last 18 months. He's the second president that Zimbabwe has had since 1980. And in his address, he highlighted some of the dark spots of the last year, including a devastating cyclone and corruption. But he also mentioned the bright spots, which include an increase in investment and also an increase in the number of tourists that are coming back into the country.
While our friends and investors may assist us, the ultimate obligation to turn around our fortunes lies with us, using our own God-given natural endowments and abilities.
He's promised transformation and a new Zimbabwe, but his critics, including the opposition, say that 39 years after a bitter war against colonial oppression, Zimbabweans are still in the trenches, fighting against abject poverty and against human rights abuses.
There is all those economic challenges, and most of the things that cause these economic challenges is the trading embargoes which imposed to Zimbabwe.
We are celebrating because we are sovereign and no longer face oppression.
The earlier President Emmerson Mnangagwa lit the eternal flame of independence. It's been burning here since 1980. It's a reminder to many of the freedom that was so bitterly fought for, but is yet to be fully attained. Shinga Inyoka, BBC News, Harare.
Well, South Africans are going to the polls in the next couple of weeks. Cyril Ramaphosa will lead the governing African National Congress, but he came to power through a bruising party conference in 2017. Our correspondent Milton Nkosi looks at whether he can bring together those who are divided.
These are the final weeks of campaigning ahead of South Africa's crucial general election next month. Here, President Cyril Ramaphosa was canvassing for votes in his own backyard of Soweto. We followed him as he went on a door-to-door campaign. But having been at the helm for just over a year, can he really save South Africa's largest political party from the litany of corruption allegations it faces? Listen to what he told me here.
ANC, having been very honest with where it made mistakes, is saving itself from the mistakes of the past, and that's why we've embarked on the process of renewal.
And some problems are self-inflicted.
Yes, we've made...
Including the historical ones, of course.
Of
but
course.
Some are, you shot yourself in the foot.
We have made some missteps, and we admit that openly, and that is what endears us to our people.
But the opposition is not convinced by President Ramaphosa's anti-corruption election ticket.
He's not different from Zuma. They are cooked from the same pot. They are the same. You cannot say this chicken feet is better than the other chicken feet, yet they come from the same pot.
Here, Ramaphosa is on a charm offensive in a posh part of town, largely populated by the white community, who, some of them, feel that they will vote for the ANC.
Latest research show that historically, for the first time, 8% of white voters in South Africa say they will consider to vote for, support President Ramaphosa, and will consider to vote for the ANC.
But all's not well at party headquarters for Mr. Ramaphosa.
In 2017, when Cyril Ramaphosa became president of the African National Congress, he won by a very, very slender margin in a very tightly and heated contest. And the faction that lost, which is a faction that is broadly aligned to former President Jacob Zuma, many of the people in that faction still do not accept President Ramaphosa's leadership of the ANC and, in fact, leadership of the country. So he is, in a way, living on borrowed time, and he and the people around him are constantly having to fight off attacks, not from outside, but from within.
And so, after this election contest, Mr. Ramaphosa will have little time to celebrate because his battles won't be over just yet. Milton Nkosi, BBC News, Johannesburg.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come, with 50 days to go to the kickoff of the Women's World Cup. Now, FIFA says more than half the match tickets have been sold. I'm Sophie Ikenye, and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top story on this program: demanding change. Hundreds of thousands of people are gathering in Khartoum in the biggest push yet for a civilian-run government. Well, let's go straight to Khartoum and speak to our... We'll try and get that story a little bit later in the program, if we can, that is. But let's go to Uganda now, where the country's Supreme Court has upheld a decision to get rid of age limits for presidential candidates. It means the country's 74-year-old current leader, Yoweri Museveni, will be eligible to contest the next election in 2021. Now, he's been in power for more than 30 years. If President Museveni does run and win, it would be his sixth elective term in office. Well, let's speak to Sarah Birete, a constitutional lawyer who joins us from Kampala. Thank you for taking time to talk to us on the program. What does this decision by the Supreme Court now mean for constitutionalism and really governance?
Yeah, thank you very much. The decision by Supreme Court that has been passed a few hours ago is the last nail in the journey for constitutionalism in Uganda, which was started in 1995. Constitutionalism is not a mere presence of a constitution as a document. It must be practiced by all leaders and referred to on a day-to-day basis in their work. The problem with this particular decision to Ugandans is that it leaves no safeguards whatsoever for peaceful handover of power.
Are there questions then being asked about the independence of the judiciary?
The independence of the judiciary is problematic, mainly in a way it is appointed. The appointing authority has no checks. So the judiciary over time has been filled with what is commonly known as cadre judges. If you look at the views of the judges that dissented, the 3 judges, they were the judges fighting to uphold constitutionalism in this country. But the judges that uphold the previous decision and dismiss the appeal even had no justifiable reasons for their decision, constitutionally speaking.
A lot of people would be wondering what were the reasons behind this scrapping of the age limit. Why was this really essential?
The amendment to scrap age limits from Uganda's constitution were basically meant to benefit one person, President Museveni. Because if you look at normal amendments for a constitution, there should not be any person, any individual perceived to be a beneficial of a constitutional amendment. But we all know that President Museveni will be 75 years in 2021. He would not be eligible to stand had it not been for this amendment. And the push he put in, the military, the way it attacked government, it attacked members of parliament, the killing of the people during consultations.
Let me step in here because, yes, we understand a lot of things happened before it was passed. But when you look across the continent, are you surprised at how easy countries are able to amend their constitutions?
Well, regimes in power normally hold members of parliament at ransom, and they are able to tilt constitutions of their countries to benefit their selfish interests. So, and the biggest governance gap in Africa is lack of constitutionalism. The way regimes abuse constitutions, use them as individual documents to legitimize their stay in power, is a big problem for Africa as a continent as a whole. And it's not surprising because maybe the people are not playing their role.
All
for
right.
Constitutionalism to thrive, there must be stakeholders, citizens ready to hold their leaders accountable,
yes,
and all the other stakeholders.
Sarah Bireta, it's a pleasure speaking to you, but thank you for taking time to talk to us on Focus on Africa. And as promised, let's go back to our top story, Sudan, where hundreds of thousands of people have gathered in Khartoum in one of the biggest protests so far to bring civilian room. We can now go to Mohamed Hashim, who is in Khartoum for us. Mohamed, what is happening there? We understand there are hundreds of thousands of protesters there now.
Hi. So, as you can see, it's been a monumental day here in Khartoum. The crowds are, you can't see an end for the crowds in sight in any direction. As you can see behind me all the way, you can't see an end in sight. Today has been a day where different groups of people, professionals, lawyers, engineers, pharmacists, have been protesting outside their various official places for the syndicates. People are trying to reclaim their syndicates. Last night, the Sudanese Professionals Association, the body that has been orchestrating these protests since December 2018, has called for a 1 million-person march tonight, and they came down here. It is unprecedented like this, and as you can see, people are just walking past. They are coming and they're all chanting all their different chants. The real question for people is, who is going to be the next government coming? The next government coming, as far as they're calling for a civilian government with minimal military representation in it, and for their demands to happen.
All right, Mohamed Hashim for us there in Khartoum. Seems like quite a busy evening for you there. Thank you. You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's time now for some sport with Peter.
Many thanks, Sophie. And South Africa's coastal city of Durban has stepped in to rescue the COSAFA Cup. The 14-nation Southern African regional event was in danger of not being played after Zimbabwe could not secure government financial support. The South African Football Association has now stepped in to ensure the tournament will kick off on the 25th of May. It means South Africa will host the event for a 4th time in 5 years. This year's tournament has added importance because 5 of the teams set to take part, Angola, Madagascar, Namibia, South Africa and Zimbabwe, can use it to prepare for June's Africa Cup of Nations finals in Egypt. To the ongoing Africa Under-17 Nations Cup now, where Cameroon scored an injury time winner to beat Morocco 2-1. and join Nigeria in the semi-finals of the competition. It means they have also qualified for the Under-17 World Cup in Brazil. With that and the result of today's other match, here is the BBC's Peter Musembi in Dar es Salaam.
In a group that is an all-West African contest, Cameroon were the first to qualify for the semi-finals and at the same time booked a place at the World Cup in Brazil later in the year. They beat Morocco 2-1 at the Azam Complex, their second victory in the group. In the late game, Guinea revived their chances of qualifying for the semi-finals when they beat Senegal 2-1. Guinea had lost their opening match to Cameroon. Morocco could still qualify for the semi-finals depending on what results they get when the final group matches take place over the weekend. All the four semi-finalists will qualify for the World Cup, and so far it's Nigeria and Cameroon that have booked their places.
Now, with 50 days to go to the kickoff of the Women's World Cup in France, more than half the match tickets have been sold. That's according to football's world governing body. FIFA said that 7 games were already sold out, including the opening match between France and South Korea at Parc des Princes on the 7th of June, the semi-finals on July 2nd and 3rd, and the final on July the 7th. All of them are taking place in Lyon. Now, 3 other group games are already sold out. They include Netherlands versus Cameroon in Valenciennes on June the 15th, Nigeria versus France in Rennes on June the 17th, and Sweden versus USA in Le Havre on June the 20th. Now, after all the excitement from the European Champions League this week, attention now turns to the Europa League. It's the second leg of the quarter-final games. Chelsea hold a 1-0 lead from last week's first leg against Slavia Prague in Prague. Defender Antonio Rudiger is set to miss the match with a minor knee injury. Chelsea will face either Benfica or Eintracht Frankfurt in the semi-finals. The Portuguese side lead 4-2 after their home leg win. Arsenal head to Napoli's Stadio San Paolo, holding a 2-0 advantage from the first leg at the Emirates Stadium. Manager Unai Emery has won this competition 3 times, but says the Gunners will not only try to defend their advantage, but also press for an away goal that will leave Napoli needing to score at least 4 times. Sophie, that's your sports.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Now, how do you recreate a golden generation? That's a question faced by Ivory Coast Football League champions ASEC Mimosa. The club's academy has produced some of the biggest names of African football, but with less stars emerging, what can the academy do to find future talent? Well, the BBC's Kimia Shokuhi went to find out.
The Ivory Coast, home to a legion of African football stars and training ground for ASEC Mimosa. Yaya Touré, Kolo Touré, Salomon Kalou, Gervinho, Zokora, Eboué.
Those are just some of the names that have come out of the club and its prized training academy, the Mimosa have come.
But since the graduation of those world-class players, fewer big names from ASEC have made their way onto the international stage. What has happened to one of the best football academies in Africa? Founded in 1948, ASEC Mimosa is by far the most successful club in the Ivory Coast. They have won 26 league titles, 9 ahead of their city rivals Africa Sports, and in 1998 they won the Africa CAF Champions League. ASEC was ahead of its time when in 1993 club president Roger Ouenin and former French player Jean-Marc Guillou got together to launch the academy.
Today, the academy is considered one of the greatest training centers in Africa.
15-year-old Amani Akua Romeo is one of the current recruits. With reminders of academy alumni found across the school, inspiration for these 50-some students comes easily.
When he told me Romaric slept in this room, I felt proud to share the room he had when he was at the academy. Maybe I could be like him.
And it seems competition for young talent, according to ASEC staff and ex-players, has diluted the force of players and the options the academy once had.
The problem is that regulations should impose that a good player goes to the best center. Because if a player has great potential, if he's very, very strong at 12 years old, It is not at neighborhood academies that it will progress to that level.
The vision of those running ASAC to create an academy that has produced players who have gone on to be some of the best in Africa was far-sighted. It's enduring, despite the challenges, and they will soon hope its glorious past and prestige can inspire another golden generation.
And that was Kimia Shokohi reporting there. And finally, a new species of giant mammal has been identified after researchers investigated bones that had been kept for decades in a Kenyan museum drawer. The species, dubbed Simba Kubwa kutoka Afrika, that's meaning big African lion in Swahili, roamed East Africa about 20 million years ago. The huge creature was part of a now extinct group of mammals called hyenodons. And don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team on Twitter. I'm at Sikenye. That's all from the program from me and the team. Thank you for your company.